Genesis 25-35 chronicles the story of Jacob, pivotal figure in biblical history. In the sun-baked lands of Canaan, a story of divine promise and family rivalry was about to unfold. Isaac, son of Abraham, had taken Rebekah as his wife, but their joy was incomplete. For 20 long years they yearned for a child, their hopes waning with each passing season. Isaac, a man of faith, pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife. His fervent prayers echoed across the barren landscape, a testament to his unwavering belief. The Lord, in his infinite wisdom, heard Isaac's supplication and granted their heart's desire. Rebekah's womb quickened with life. Her pregnancy was far from ordinary. Within her, 2 children struggled, their conflict a harbinger of things to come. Troubled by this unusual development, Rebekah sought the Lord's counsel. His response was both a blessing and a prophecy. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. When the time came for Rebekah to give birth, prophecy began to unfold. First child emerged, red and hairy, a striking sight that prompted them to name him Esau. But even as Esau took his first breath, his brother's hand grasped his heel, as if trying to pull him back. This second child they named Jacob, the supplanter, a name that would prove prophetic in the years to come. As the twin brothers grew, their differences became more pronounced. Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, his rugged lifestyle reflecting his father's favor. Jacob, in contrast, was a quiet man, preferring the tranquility of the tents and winning his mother's affection. One fateful day, as the aroma of a savory stew filled the air, Esau returned from the fields, famished and weary. The enticing scent of Jacob's cooking drew him like a moth to a flame. "Quick, let me have some of that red stew," Esau demanded, his hunger overriding all other concerns. Jacob, ever the opportunist, saw his chance. With calculated calm, he replied, "First, sell me your birthright." In that moment, the future of their family hung in the balance. Esau, driven by the immediate need to satisfy his hunger, made a decision that would echo through generations. "Look, I am about to die," he exaggerated. "What good is the birthright to me?" Without hesitation, Jacob pressed his advantage. "Swear to me first," he insisted, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the transaction. Esau, perhaps not fully grasping the significance of his actions, swore an oath, trading his birthright for a simple meal of bread and lentil stew. As Esau ate and drank, satisfying his immediate hunger, he rose and went on his way, seemingly unconcerned about the precious inheritance he had just relinquished. In this simple act, Esau despised his birthright, setting in motion a chain of events that would shape the destiny of nations. Years passed, and Isaac grew old, his eyes dim with age. Sensing the approach of death, he called for Esau, his firstborn and favorite son. "Go out to the field and hunt some wild game for me," Isaac instructed, his voice weak but filled with anticipation. "Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." Rebekah, overhearing this conversation, saw an opportunity to fulfill the prophecy she had received years ago. With quick thinking, she devised a plan to secure the blessing for her beloved Jacob. "Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats," she told Jacob, her voice urgent and low. "I'll prepare your father's favorite food. Then you'll take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies." Jacob, though hesitant, followed his mother's instructions. Disguised in Esau's clothes, with goat skins on his hands and neck to mimic his brother's hairy skin, Jacob approached his blind father. The deception was elaborate, involving not just appearance, but also the aroma of the outdoors that clung to Esau's garments. Isaac, suspicious at first, was ultimately convinced by the familiar smell of his elder son's clothes and the taste of his favorite dish. With trembling hands, he bestowed upon Jacob the coveted blessing meant for the firstborn: prosperity, authority, and divine favor. The deception complete, Jacob barely escaped before Esau returned from his hunt. The elder brother's anguish and rage upon discovering the theft of his blessing shook the very foundations of the family. Esau's vow of vengeance forced Jacob to flee, setting him on a path that would lead to exile, growth, and eventual reconciliation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jacob found himself alone in the wilderness, fleeing from his brother's wrath. Exhausted from his journey, he chose a stone for his pillow and lay down to sleep under the vast canopy of stars. Little did he know that this ordinary night would become extraordinary. In the depths of slumber, a vivid dream unfolded before Jacob's mind's eye. A magnificent ladder or stairway appeared, stretching from earth to heaven. Angels of God ascended and descended upon it, their movements a mesmerizing dance between the realms. Suddenly, the Lord himself stood beside Jacob, his presence both awesome and comforting. "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac," declared. The divine voice resonated through Jacob's being as God reaffirmed the covenant he had made with Abraham, promising land, descendants as numerous as dust, and blessing to all peoples through Jacob's lineage. Awaking with a start, Jacob's eyes widened in wonder. "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it," whispered, awe filling his voice. The ordinary ground had become sacred space. With reverence, Jacob took the stone he had used as a pillow and set it up as a pillar, pouring oil on top as an act of consecration. In this moment of divine encounter, Jacob made a vow. If God would watch over him, provide for him, and bring him safely back to his father's house, then the Lord would be his God. This place, once just a rest stop, would become Bethel, the house of God. With renewed purpose, Jacob continued his journey eastward, his steps light despite the uncertainty ahead. As he approached the land of his mother's people, the sight of a well in a field caught his attention. 3 flocks of sheep lay nearby, waiting to be watered. Approaching the shepherds, Jacob inquired about his uncle Laban. To his surprise, they not only knew Laban, but pointed out his daughter Rachel, who was approaching with her father's sheep. Jacob's heart quickened at the sight of her. In a display of strength and courtesy, Jacob single-handedly rolled the stone away from the well's mouth, a task usually requiring several men. He watered Rachel's flock, then, overcome with emotion at finding his relatives, kissed Rachel and wept aloud. Rachel, startled but intrigued, ran to tell her father. Laban, upon hearing of his nephew's arrival, rushed to meet Jacob, embracing him warmly and bringing him into his home. As Jacob recounted his story, Laban exclaimed, "You are my own flesh and blood." For a month, Jacob stayed with Laban's family, working alongside the shepherds. But this was more than a family reunion. It was the beginning of a new chapter in Jacob's life, one that would shape his future in ways he could not yet imagine. As the days passed, Jacob's affection for Rachel blossomed into love. Her beauty and gentle spirit captivated him, making his labor seem light. When Laban asked what wages Jacob desired, answer came easily. "I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter Rachel." Laban agreed, and Jacob set to his task with enthusiasm. 7 years of hard work lay ahead, but to Jacob, they passed like a few days because of his love for Rachel. As the appointed time drew near, Jacob's anticipation grew. The wedding day arrived, filled with feasting and celebration. But under the cover of darkness, Laban orchestrated a fateful switch. In the morning light, Jacob discovered that he had been deceived. It was Leah, the older daughter, lay beside him. Confronting Laban in anger and dismay, Jacob demanded an explanation. Laban calmly replied, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one." He then offered a proposition. Complete the bridal week with Leah, and Rachel could also be his wife in return for another 7 years of labor. Jacob agreed, his love for Rachel overcoming his sense of injustice. So it was that Jacob found himself with 2 wives. Leah, the unwanted bride thrust upon him by deceit, and Rachel, the love for whom he willingly committed 14 years of his life. This complex family dynamic set the stage for years of rivalry, jealousy, and strife. Yet through it all, God's hand continued to guide Jacob's path, weaving even human deception into his greater plan. As the years unfolded, Jacob's household became a whirlwind of activity and emotion. Leah, though unloved, was blessed with fertility. She bore Jacob 6 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, as well as a daughter named Dinah. Each birth was a bittersweet moment, filled with hope that Jacob's affection might turn her way. Rachel, beautiful and beloved, found herself barren and consumed with envy. In her desperation, she gave Jacob her maidservant Bilhah as a surrogate, who bore Dan and Naphtali. Not to be outdone, Leah offered her maidservant Zilpah, who gave birth to Gad and Asher. In the midst of this familial competition, Rachel's fervent prayers were finally answered. She conceived and bore Joseph, declaring, "God has taken away my disgrace." Little did she know the pivotal role this favored son would play in their future. As Jacob's family grew, so did his wealth. His flocks multiplied under his careful management, much to Laban's benefit. But tension brewed as Laban's sons began to resent Jacob's prosperity. The once warm welcome had cooled, and Jacob sensed it was time for a change. One day, the Lord spoke to Jacob, saying, "Return to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you." With divine assurance, Jacob knew it was time to leave Haran and return to Canaan. Gathering Rachel and Leah in the field, away from prying ears, Jacob shared his plan. He recounted Laban's changing attitude and God's command to return home. His wives, recognizing their father's unfair treatment, agreed to go. Seizing an opportunity when Laban was away shearing sheep, Jacob quietly packed up his family and possessions. Unknown to Jacob, Rachel had stolen her father's household gods, adding a layer of complexity to their departure. 3 days passed before Laban learned of their flight. Enraged, he pursued them for 7 days, finally catching up in the hill country of Gilead. But God intervened, warning Laban in a dream not to say anything, good or bad, to Jacob. The confrontation was tense. Laban accused Jacob of sneaking away and stealing his gods. Jacob, unaware of Rachel's theft, confidently allowed Laban to search their belongings. Through clever deception, Rachel managed to hide the idols, and Laban's search proved fruitless. Finally, Jacob unleashed years of pent-up frustration, recounting his years of faithful service and Laban's repeated deceptions. The two men, realizing the futility of further conflict, agreed to part ways peacefully, erecting a pillar as a witness to their covenant. As Jacob journeyed towards Canaan, his thoughts turned to Esau, brother he had wronged years ago. Fear gripped his heart as he remembered Esau's vow of vengeance. In a strategic move, Jacob sent messengers ahead with gifts, hoping to appease his brother's anger. The messengers returned with alarming news. Esau was coming to meet Jacob, accompanied by 400 men. Terrified, Jacob divided his camp into 2 groups, reasoning that if Esau attacked one, the other might escape. In his distress, Jacob turned to prayer, reminding God of his promises and acknowledging his own unworthiness. That night, alone by the ford of the Jabbok, Jacob encountered a mysterious figure. They wrestled until daybreak, neither prevailing. As dawn approached, the man touched Jacob's hip, wrenching it out of socket. Still, Jacob refused to let go without a blessing. The stranger declared, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans, and have overcome." This divine encounter left Jacob forever changed, physically limping but spiritually strengthened. As the sun rose, he prepared to face Esau, uncertain of what lay ahead but trusting in God's promise. To Jacob's amazement and relief, Esau ran to meet him, embracing him with tears. The brothers' reconciliation was a powerful moment of forgiveness and restoration, defying Jacob's worst fears and demonstrating the transformative power of time and God's work in their lives. After the emotional reunion with Esau, Jacob and his family settled near the city of Shechem. He purchased a plot of land from the sons of Hamor, the city's ruler, and set up his tents. For a time, peace reigned as Jacob's household integrated into the local community. However, this tranquility was shattered when Dinah, Jacob's only daughter, ventured out to visit the women of the land. Shechem, son of Hamor, saw her and was immediately captivated. In a moment of passion and poor judgment, he took her and lay with her by force. Despite his actions, Shechem fell deeply in love with Dinah and sought to marry her. Hamor approached Jacob, proposing not just a marriage, but an alliance between their peoples. Jacob's sons, hearing of their sister's defilement, were filled with grief and fury. Simeon and Levi, Dinah's full brothers, devised a treacherous plan. They agreed to the marriage and alliance on the condition that all the men of Shechem be circumcised. The Shechemites, seeing the potential for profitable relations with Jacob's family, agreed. On the 3rd day, when the men of Shechem were still in pain from their circumcision, Simeon and Levi attacked the unsuspecting city. They killed every male, including Hamor and Shechem, and took Dinah from Shechem's house. The other sons of Jacob joined in plundering the city, taking all the wealth, women, and children. Jacob, horrified by his son's actions, feared retribution from the surrounding people. The incident at Shechem marked a dark chapter in Jacob's family history, revealing the volatile mix of honor, vengeance, and deceit that would continue to plague his household. In the aftermath of the Shechem incident, God spoke to Jacob, instructing him to return to Bethel, the site of his earlier divine encounter. Recognizing the gravity of the moment, Jacob called his household to purify themselves, rid themselves of foreign gods, and change their garments. As they journeyed, a divine protection fell upon them. The terror of God came upon the towns all around them, preventing any pursuit of Jacob's family. Arriving at Bethel, Jacob built an altar to the God who had answered him in his day of distress. It was here that God appeared to Jacob once again, reaffirming the covenant he had made with Abraham and Isaac. The Lord restated Jacob's new name, Israel, and promised him a nation and a community of nations from his offspring. The land promised to his forefathers would be given to him and his descendants. As a memorial to this divine encounter, Jacob set up a stone pillar and poured out a drink offering and oil upon it. The renewal of God's covenant at Bethel marked a pivotal moment in Jacob's spiritual journey, reinforcing his role in the divine plan despite the recent turmoil. Leaving Bethel, Jacob and his family continued their journey towards Ephrath, Bethlehem. Rachel, heavily pregnant, went into labor. The delivery proved difficult and dangerous. As she struggled to give birth, the midwife tried to encourage her, saying, "Don't despair, for you have another son." With her last breath, Rachel named the child Ben-Oni, meaning son of my trouble. Jacob, however, renamed him Benjamin, son of my right hand. Rachel's death in childbirth was a devastating blow to Jacob, who had loved her deeply from the moment they met at the well in Haran. Jacob buried Rachel on the way to Ephrath and set up a pillar over her tomb. This pillar became a lasting memorial, marking Rachel's grave for generations to come. The loss of his beloved wife, coupled with the joy of a new son, created a bittersweet moment in Jacob's life. Benjamin's birth completed Jacob's family of 12 sons, who would become the progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel. Yet this moment of completion was tinged with sorrow, foreshadowing the complex dynamics that would continue to shape Jacob's family and the future nation of Israel. As Jacob settled into his later years, the dynamics within his family grew increasingly complex. Joseph, firstborn son of his beloved Rachel, became his favorite. Jacob's preferential treatment was evident in the ornate robe he gifted to Joseph, sparking jealousy among his brothers. Joseph's position in the family was further strained when he began having prophetic dreams. In one dream, he and his brothers were binding sheaves in the field when suddenly his sheaf rose and stood upright, while his brothers' sheaves gathered around and bowed down to his. In another, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down to him. Naively, Joseph shared these dreams with his family. His brothers' hatred intensified, and even Jacob was troubled by the implications. The seeds of conflict were sown, setting the stage for a dramatic turn of events that would shape the future of Jacob's entire clan. One fateful day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers who were grazing the flocks near Shechem. Unbeknownst to Jacob, this simple errand would lead to years of heartache and separation. Upon seeing Joseph approach, his brothers plotted against him. Their initial plan to kill him was thwarted by Reuben, who suggested they throw Joseph into a cistern instead. But before Reuben could secretly rescue Joseph, the other brothers sold him to a group of Ishmaelite traders headed for Egypt. To cover their deceit, the brothers dipped Joseph's famous robe in goat's blood and presented it to their father. Jacob, devastated by the sight, concluded that a wild animal had devoured his son. His grief was inconsolable, and he mourned Joseph for many days, refusing to be comforted. This tragic event marked a turning point in Jacob's life. The loss of Joseph cast a long shadow over the family, influencing their actions and relationships for years to come. Years passed, and a severe famine struck the land of Canaan. Jacob, hearing that there was grain in Egypt, sent his sons to buy food. Little did he know that this journey would lead to the discovery that Joseph was not only alive, but had risen to become second in command in Egypt. When the news reached Jacob that Joseph was alive, he was stunned. "I'm convinced," he exclaimed. "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." So Jacob set out for Egypt with his entire family, his heart filled with a mixture of joy, anticipation, and perhaps a touch of apprehension. God spoke to him in a vision, reassuring him about the move and promising to make him into a great nation in Egypt. The reunion between Jacob and Joseph was emotionally charged. Joseph threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. Jacob said to Joseph, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years. As his death approached, he called Joseph to his bedside and made him swear to bury him in Canaan, in the cave where Abraham and Isaac were buried. In his final moments, Jacob gathered his sons and blessed each of them, prophesying about their futures. He also blessed Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, adopting them as his own and elevating them to the status of tribal patriarch. Jacob's life came to a close at the age of 147. Joseph, fulfilling his promise, took his father's body back to Canaan for burial. Jacob's journey, marked by struggle, deception, love, loss, and ultimately reconciliation, had come to an end, but his legacy as Israel, the father of a nation, was just beginning.